Let's take a quick look at how to utilize track versions in Cubase. Track versions allow us to deal with alternate events on the same track in an organized manner. Let's say we have a pattern, and let's say we programmed a pattern or recorded audio onto a track, and we kind of like it, but we're not 100% sure. But maybe we want to try a different idea. So what a lot of people do is maybe move the event over, re-record, or another popular method is to duplicate the tracks and erase the contents and maybe try a new idea on this particular track. And these types of scenarios are ideal for starting to work with track versions. To create a new track version, you can select the track, go to your project menu to track versions, and we just choose new version. You could also use the keyboard shortcut of Shift plus Control or Command plus the letter N. We could also hover over the name of the particular track, and then we see this little drop-down menu, and we could do a new version here. So as soon as we've done that, we notice that we didn't actually erase the original event that was there. What we've done is we've chosen to kind of tuck it away and hide it. So our new version, we could just now drag this over, and we could switch between the two different versions. If we wanted to relabel these particular versions, we could just double click and we'll call this, let's say, beat. And we'll say that our second version has the ride symbol in it. So we could just give it a particular name. And now we could switch our versions by names. Now, track versions are not only used for MIDI tracks, we could use them for instrument tracks. So if you have different ideas, you could have different colors for your track versions. If you wanted to experiment with different tempo tracks, so if you wanted something that was steady, you wanted to have something maybe with more subtle changes or a lot of variations, you could just immediately go back to whatever tempo track you wanted to. Similar with the chord track. So if you want to try different chord progressions in your song without having to do a whole new project, simply use a track version. Where track versions are most used in is going to be with audio. So, and especially like recording a live group of multiple musicians together. So in this case, I have Groove Agent is the outputs are routed into groups, and those groups are set to audio inputs on our tracks. So let's say we're going to do a multi-track recording. All right, so imagine it's a band, whatever. So I'm going to come over and just hit record, and we're going to capture the audio that's playing from this track version, going out to Groove Agent, and we're just going to capture the audio. And we'll say this is take one for the group. Okay, so I'm going to select all of the tracks, and now that they're multiply selected, I can say, let's take all these tracks and just do a new track version. So I'm going to switch the track version here to a different variation. We'll select all of our, so now all these are going to a new track version. Again, the original data isn't erased, it's still present, it's just in another track version. So we will hit record and make sure all the tracks are armed. Okay, so this is take two. Okay, so now we have two versions. Now, if we wanted to listen back and forth and switch between the two versions, I could select all the tracks and we'll listen to, let's say, take one, or just take two rather, and let's listen to take one. And now all of the versions are switching. And let's say I just wanted one of the tracks to change to version one. So I could take a single track and have that on different variations or different track versions as well. Now, let's say I want to do a different version. We'll do, let's say, track version 3 of our MIDI, but I'm only going to record on one particular track, not all of the tracks. So just one particular track. So we're going to say, let's do a new version on this one. So as we hit record, only that one track. And we can see that we have different version numbers, and each of these versions will have an ID. And the ID allows you to kind of switch and keep the different takes organized as a collective entity. So we'll just do this. So this one will have its own independent ID. So let's select all the tracks again. And I'm going to say, let's do a new track version. So now that we do this, we could choose to do our fourth variation here of our part. And make sure all of these are set to record. And we're going to do take 4 for all of the tracks. Okay, so when we do this, let's go ahead and we'll mute our MIDI playback, and let's just switch between, again, our different takes. So we'll select all the tracks and go to different versions. Now let's say if we go to version 3, now version 3, we may get a little indication that since we only recorded version 3 on one particular track, you'll get this missing track version. So we can see that there's no real version 3 here for these particular tracks. So if we want, we could just simply come here and deselect the current track version that's active. We could duplicate the current track version and assign a common version ID. Or we could create a new empty track version and assign a common ID. So this way, when we switch, we could just have all the different takes associated, and we could manage when the version IDs are out of sync between different tracks. So now many times people may want to take different parts of, a recording and say, I want version 1 for measures 1 through 4, version 3 for measures 5 through 6, etc. How can we create an edit between different track versions? So if I grab my range selection tool, I can just come over here. Let's say I'll select my range in this particular event, and I'm going to copy. So we'll go to edit, to copy, or use the common command or control plus the letter C. And we've copied this range. And I could go to a different track version, and then I'm going to go to paste at origin. So if we go to edit to functions, you can see Alt or Option plus the letter V, not Control or Command plus V, but the Alt or V. That's going to actually paste the events at the origin. So now when I do that, we can see that we're going to have part of track version 4, and then we're going to have this on track version number 2. So we could just simply switch back and forth between them. Another method of doing this is to use an empty track version as kind of a container. So I'm going to select all of the tracks, and let's come over here. And as we, again, select all the tracks, I'm going to say, let's do a new version. We could think of this as maybe almost like our comp version. So we're going to say, let's go to version 4 and say, I really liked the beginning of version 4. So I'm going to take these particular events and let's go ahead and copy. So again, just control or command plus the letter C. Let's go to our new empty track version. And again, let's paste at origin. So let's say, okay, now I wanted to switch to take 2, and I wanted to use the rest of I wanted to use these measures from take 2 of this version, and we could just have this snap directly to our events. So let's say we'll do from measure 5 through measure 7, and again, copy. and go to our almost our comp track version, and then we could just kind of paste the events. And I may have been just sloppy when I selected, but that's how we could copy and create kind of a different comped version. So just kind of select it and then copy and paste that origin. So many times people go, okay, should I use lanes when I'm doing like comping parts, or should I use track versions? I tend to use track versions for multi-track and lanes for a single part, but there's no real rule of thumb. So sometimes you may find yourself like going back and forth between track versions and lanes. So if we have something that's kind of set up as a comp where we've, painfully worked and done all of our comp editing on a particular track, we can have our comp. But let's say I wanted to select this particular track, and this track has lanes, not track versions. So if I wanted to go to my project, we go to track versions menu, and we can say create versions from lanes. So now I will just turn off my lane, and then when we see all of our lanes have now been converted directly to track versions. So that allows you to kind of go back and forth between the two different paradigms. And again, once we have that, we could say we want to create lanes from track versions or create versions from track lanes. Now, another method that I like to use track versions for is when doing editing where I may want to keep the original completely intact. So let's say I was doing some like vocal tuning on a particular track. I would say, okay, I want to come here and I'm going to click and I'm going to say duplicate the track version. So now I have my original audio files. I'm going to select the events, go to my audio menu, and we're going to choose bounce selection. And I'm going to create a new separate audio file. So my original file has all the original vocal recordings. And now I have on a track version a new file that is a bounce selection. So now I can do all of my very audio editing on this particular track version. So say, okay, I need to move that note. I need to do this. And if someone says, can you go back to the original and listen to it? You could just simply switch to the different track version to have the original, or go back to your edited task as well. So you can see how using track versions can really speed up your editing and productivity inside of Cubase. If you have found this video helpful, please feel free to hit the like button and to subscribe to the channel.